This is a discussion and demo on why screen scraping or website scraping is a terrible way to acquire a translation quote for your website. All too often, clients will call in and request a quotation for their website and ask us to scrape their website. In other words, that means using a tool to go and download the code for a website. And I want to show you the reasons why this is a terrible idea. Essentially, that process can lead to quotations that might vary as much as 300%. We recently had a client call in and there was some frustration with their current translation provider, and that frustration was based on the fact that they had underquoted the translation effort by 300%. So with the information we give you today, we hope to show you a better way to gather quotations for websites. So let's start. There are many tools one can use to scrape a website. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to use a tool called SiteSucker. On the Windows side, there's InSpider, there's kind of an old school program that's tough to find right now, but Blue Squirrel Grab a Site. So there's quite a few different tools you can use, and they all have their merits. However, the bottom line is that there's tons of settings that you need to look at and understand. And if you don't give these specifics, especially to the translation service providers that you're asking to gather these quotes, the numbers are going to be all over the map. But even if you do have identical specifications, these tools do operate differently, and we'll show you in a little bit the type of code that they download, which is really not very good for basing a translation quote. But let's go ahead and start. So one of the key settings, and we'll go through some of them here, is how much to grab. So this setting right here is the key thing. Because again, what parts of the website are you going to translate? That's really most important. Remember, you have a blog, you might have a news section. Is that all going to be relevant to what you're trying to do in your non-English markets or in the markets that you're translating into? So I can go ahead and check that, and I can say 2 levels, 3 levels. And again, just so we understand what the levels are, let me just hit OK on this. For our current website. So this is obviously level 1. And when you get to the next levels, let's just go here. And what I want you to pay attention to is the directory structure. So see how we're argotranslate.com and then translation. So that's the next level down. If I were to click on something on this page, I might be a 3rd level down. So that's really what's meant by those levels. Then there's also, not to go over every setting, but there's also settings of, what files will you restrict? In other words, are there any absolute URLs that you're going to include or exclude? And here are the different file types are here. Will I allow, do I want audio? Do I want images? And that's very important, because remember, a key part of your website is also the off-page content. So that would be the meta information or the tags that are related to images or the descriptions of pages. Those are all very important for your SEO efforts. So let's pretend that we went ahead and did that download of the website, and I've taken the liberty of preparing 2 projects. One where I did the site scraping, but the other where I actually did an extraction. So our website is built in WordPress, and we use the WPML plugin to handle the translation aspects. As you can see, our website is translated into Spanish and French. So I use that tool to basically export all the pages, all of the strings, so that means the special and custom fields, as well as the alt content on any images or the description content on pages. So we're going to contrast the 2 different methods. So let's go ahead and look at what the content looks like. So I'm in WordBee, which is our translation management system, and as you'll see, I downloaded the content into what are called XLIFs, which is XML, an XML standard that's built specifically for the translation industry. As you can see, the content is really clean. So you'll see that I have a minimum amount of inline tags. That would be tags that are occurring inside of the sentence. And of course, all of the code has also been isolated and not included in the scope of the project. So these are really, really clean and ready for quotation. Now, instead, let's take a look at what it looks like for the files that we scraped. So you'll see these are all little bits and pieces of the code that are coming through. Now, if we spend some time on a template, we can certainly clean some of this up. But remember, we're just at the quotation stage, so it would be a little bit silly to do that. But it really brings us to our first reason why this is such a terrible idea. It's accuracy of word counts. As you can see, if I were to quote this project, I've got very clean content, where if I were to quote this one, I have all sorts of code that's embedded in the files. This also brings us to the second reason this is such a bad idea. If we receive approval, let's say, again, we do the quotes on the different scenarios, and we receive approval on this clean XLIF project, using the WPML plugin to export the files, we can basically begin on approval. We have everything we need. We can go ahead and translate the site, push the files back, no issues. If we receive approval on this project, which I think the odds will be very slim once you see the word counts, we'd still have to come back to the client and say, okay, great, how are we going to do this? How are we going to translate the content in a way that you can then put it on the website? This is not a file format which can be imported back into the site. So if we were to translate this, great, you'd have a bunch of translated HTML files that you really couldn't do anything with. So again, we would still have to go back to you and say, all right, how are we going to do this? So let's go ahead and look at the word counts, because that's the other issue is how are we going to do an apples to apples comparison? So if I'm a buyer, how am I going to figure out what we're looking at? So I want to show you, this is a word count screen. I know it's a little bit complex, but it has all the different levels of match and repetition. So there are indeed some repetitions. I know these are different levels of repetition inside the site. But if you look, I've got a total word count. This column is total word count of 20,703 words, of which after repetitions, it's about 16,000 words. Let's go ahead and look at the scrape. So I have those word counts here. The word count's 161,000 words. Now, mind you, there's about 70 some thousand repetitions, but it brings the total down to 78,000 words of no match. But that's still a ridiculous difference. We're going from 78,000 net words to, on the XLIF project, 16,000 net words. So there's no way that you can expect to really get an apples to apples comparison. Now, the other important point to note is we're looking at what is a WordPress site. However, there are multiple connectors. We have connectors for all sorts of systems like Kentico, Adobe Experience Manager, Sitecore, Drupal, Joomla, Typo3, pretty much most of the major CMS. We have connectors so we can facilitate this sort of extraction of the content. So to recap a bit, the issues that we've discovered so far is no ability to import the content if you get approval, if you have that HTML grab. The format of the content, you've seen that this is terrible in terms of looking at all the little pieces of code that aren't even supposed to be translated. I had to go through 2 pages of content before I actually got to text that would be translatable. So there's that. And the word counts. So if I'm expecting to do an apples to apples comparison, there's really no way to do it. And last but not least, the variability in the settings that are used on the website extraction tool. So my recommendation to you is this. If someone tells you that they can get you an accurate quotation on your website for translation by using a site scraper, you should run as fast as you can the other way. You should really talk to your translation service provider about that very first important step, and that is how are we going to exchange content? How are we going to move content from the website to the translation environment and then back to the website? Thank you very much for listening to this presentation. Should you have any questions, please feel free to contact us anytime.